It's Eric from Marsha Garden, and I'm going to show you how to propagate this plant, Yucca Gloriosa. I'm doing this because they're here on our terrace at our apartment. It really creates a big space where you can't even get close to them because they are quite sharp, the points on here. I'm going to create a living fence at my garden to help combat against the wild boar that continuously enter into our garden. And if you haven't seen some of my battles there with the wild boar, I have a video of it up on my channel. This is not native from Spain, but it is a very, very common plant here. It's called Spanish Dagger, often Yucca. It goes by many names and there's many varieties. This one that I have, I believe, is Yucca filamentosa. Yeah, Yucca filamentosa. I think it was used in the Americas as like a needle and thread by Native Americans. You can really tell that it's a very fibrous plant and that in antiquity they could find some uses for this plant. Looks like you could make rope out of it. Spaniards have used it a lot in gardening. That's why it's so common here. You'll see it all over the place and all over the world as a very tolerant dry land plant. I've abused these plants because that's what they were here for. I think the previous owners of our apartment had planted these so they would last a long period of time while they're away from their holiday house. I'm just gonna start by taking off these dead leaves here to clean it up a bit and make it easier to make my cuts. You can do that to the whole plant, have a nice clean area. You can see that I haven't treated this plant very well because in a healthy yucca, these leaves are usually quite green, but it's also normal that when they are stressed that they'll die back like this. I mean, they are very drought resistant. So you just go around, rip off all the dead leaves. It's a much better technique to pull down on them because you have a much more pleasing aesthetic for the plant. And also you don't have all this organic material hanging off of the plant. Talking about how drought resistant they are, this year we had a very dry spring, which normally here in Spain and in Mediterranean climates, spring is the typical time when we get some rain. And then you go through a very extensive, long period of drought through the summer. We're going to use a glass jar and some water to get some roots established. Yucca grows roots very easily just in water, but you want to be careful so it doesn't rot the stem. Be careful about overwatering your yucca because they will suffer from root rot and stem rot if they're overwatered. You can see I've cleaned it all up. It's ready to be cut. Here, one little sprout coming up. I've got my Japanese saw. I'm just gonna make my first few cuts. And I think I'm going to do this a bit different than probably seen most people do because they're cultivating for a house plant and they wanted to keep it quite aesthetically pleasing. But for me, I'm trying to get as many plants as I can out of this. I'm going to make several cuts, one here, and then try to propagate using from this point up and get as many segments as I can and see if the trunks without any leaves will also propagate and grow roots. I have one plant. Let's see if I can get it to smaller, more manageable pieces. I have lots of cuttings from my yucca, 10 in total, 3, 6, 8, and 10. It's a perfect even number to do a trial. Not to mention these two will also go directly into the garden. I've got my own potting mix, just homemade compost and coconut coir. I tried to avoid peat-based compost. I think everybody knows well by now the reasons why. Just make as much compost as you can on your own. And I think that coconut coir is really a good way to get the most out of your own compost. It's not sieved, just very rough compost. Half coconut coir and homemade compost. That's why it's so rough. I get some rocks. The soil in my area is very rocky. Here I am placing the cuttings into two different mediums, potting mix and water. If you decide to use the glass jar technique,
Change the water every week or as you see fit, as the water quickly gets clouded and full of bacterial life. You can add rooting hormone if you would like, but I try to avoid additional inputs. If it was a rare or expensive cutting, you may want to invest in rooting hormone.
Here's my trial. You have the potted up plants in soil, the yucca in water. Then I'm gonna have these other 4 that will go directly into the garden, see if they'll survive with minimal watering, if they'll take root there in our soil.
Here we are 8 weeks later, and you can see the results. Some of the glass jars have rooted quite well, and the cuttings with the leaves still on outperform the cuttings without leaves, but most of them have managed to put out roots. I prefer the potting mix technique because you can assure that the plant establishes more robust roots, and they don't have a shock of adapting to a new medium.
If you like what I'm doing here on this channel, please subscribe. You can expect a variety of things from my channel, from garden tours around Spain, my own adventures in the garden, and also maybe perhaps a bit of philosophy surrounding the garden. What is gardening? And now I have a much easier pot that I can actually move in my cargo bike, get it over to the garden, where then I take care of this plant better. It was just too big for me to move it before.